Hi, so this video isn't a guide on how to play Luster. This video is specifically for those of you who are looking for what equipment to wear, as well as what affixes you should be using. Even if you don't play Luster, a lot of this information will still apply to you. So let's jump into it. First, let's start with something easy. What rings should you be using on Luster? Now, there are a variety of rings that you can use on your Luster, but only a couple of them are actually worth using. Please note that I'm not going to be going over S4 Transmutation Circle, and I'm also not going to be going over the rings and which elements they then convert to as well. I think that's a meme and it's fun to use, but adds a extra level of gameplay that's not entirely worth it. Now on my units, I currently use Mate Maniac, Atomizer Fanatic, and then Leaping Dodge. Now for those of you who are curious of what Leaping Dodge does, Leaping Dodge allows you to then put an action skill that is available on your sub palette that allows you to then gain a high jump that has a cooldown of 5 seconds that then basically gives you a ton of iframes or invincibility frames. Basically, if you wind up messing up one of your dodges or you know you're about to get hit and for some reason you can't dodge right away, you can actually use this ability to then make it so you don't get hit. So the ring I don't put on my units is actually Mag Excitement, and there's two reasons. One, by upgrading the ring to plus 20, it then gives me an added 20 range power. And then two, making sure that your mag is always fed is an important task when playing Luster because of the way that mags work. Mag attacks actually add to your voltage gauge. So by using Mag Excitement, you then allow your mag to do even more damage as well. And then for your right ring, you actually have two that is available for you to use. This is dependent on whether or not you have enough crit rate. And because Luster doesn't actually have a lot of innate crit rate as it is, that I personally prefer using Perfectionist. Now, this is another composite ring, but if you don't have the Perfectionist ring, you can actually use Perfectionist Ranged, which basically increases your damage by 103% or 3% when your HP is above 75%. And then you have your Crit Strike ring, which then adds 20% crit rate and then 3% crit damage. So it really is all up to you on which one you prefer using in that case. Now that we've gone over rings, let's go over S grade abilities that are going to be used on your units. Now, me personally, currently I'm using S6 Guardian Shield, S7 Still Grace, and S8 Skydance Support. However, I'm going to be changing my S6 and my S7, and there's a couple of reasons why. But first, let's go over all of the available S6 abilities. That way you can have a better understanding as to why I'll be changing them. Well, S6 Guardian Shield is actually incredibly good to use on Luster, considering the fact that if you get hit, you basically die. The entire point of Luster is actually to be able to mitigate the amount of damage that you take via dodging, which then also adds to the amount of damage that you're dealing as well. So while you can use that, there are two other S abilities that I would personally use over this. And they are S6 Skillful Adept, which increases your crit rate by 15%, and then S6 Tenacious Heal Scourge, which grants you super armor for 60 seconds after being inflicted with a status ailment. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what super armor does, basically you could think of it as just a lighter version of Massive Hunter, which is a hunter skill. Now, of course, if you don't have any of these, you can also then use S6 Fortified Ranged, which gives you plus 30 to your ranged power. This leads me back over to Guardian Shield, which reduces damage taken by 7%. I would use this more as a safety net when you're playing Luster, but as you begin to become more accustomed to the class than dodging, I would then use any of the others previously listed, like Fortified Ranged, or even Skillful Adept or Tenacious Heal Scourge. S7 abilities are a little bit easier to manage because there actually aren't that many that are good for Luster. Previously, I was using Still Grace because it's just really good to be able to use on someone like a Twal or even Ranger with a Twal sub. Because what Still Grace does is it recovers 4 PP per second while standing still for more than 1 second. Now, this can still be good for a lot of fights that have a lot of downtime, but unfortunately, there aren't many of those. So then personally, I suggest going into Fortified Range 2, which then gives you range power plus 50, or Fortified Attack 2, which gives you melee, ranged, and tech power plus 45. And then for S8's, obviously everyone's major choice, which is Skydance Support. Skydance Support activates Shifted D-Band after staying in the air for 2 seconds and then every 10 seconds afterwards. As I've mentioned a couple times before, basically all you have to do is jump into the air for 2 seconds, then land, and then it resets the proc. And then if you don't have Skydance Support, you can use Mighty Medication. Now this is just something that you can use to heal because what it does is it makes you temporarily invincible while drinking a mate item. And then you also have Fortified Range, which gives you, as we mentioned a couple times before, ranged power plus 30. Now S-grade augments on units are luckily enough not actually all that difficult to grasp. It really comes out to what you have available to you at that moment. A lot of these you can actually farm during one of the recommended daily quests, which is Disturbing Whistle of Chaos. And then you can also farm them off of Ultra Hard Luther or Wisdom Incarnate Ultra Hard Urgent Quest. Now I know Affixing isn't always the easiest part, and come New Genesis, a lot of this will be even easier, but this is still information that's good to go over. Now, we're going to go over S-grade abilities that are going to be good on weapons. Now, I'm not going to be going over which weapons are good, nor am I going to be going over which weapons are best for a luster. Eventually, we'll all be using the Crass or Ayer weapon series. So use this S-grade information to at least plan for those weapon series or adapt them to your current weapons. Also, if you've made it to this far in the video and you're wondering, why am I editing the video this way? It's because I wanted to try something new. So I hope you've enjoyed it so far. All right, let's get back into it. Now, when it comes to S abilities on weapons, there are a variety of reasons why you would use them. Some you'll be using for maybe boss fights, others you'll be using as a part of a set. To use an example, I'm using Petal Gleam S1. S1 Petal Gleam increases power by 3% for 30 seconds after inflicting 450,000 damage. This has no cooldown, so long as you keep on refreshing the 450,000 damage, then Petal Gleam will remain active. So it's incredibly easy to keep active. Now, because of Petal Gleam, there are a ton of other augments that then activate based on that one. But preferably, I'm using Will of the Petal Sea, which then, while Petal Gleam, Sea Gleam, or Snow Gleam are active, attack power is then increased by 3%. And then as the last part of the set, I'm using Petal Sea Song 2, which is while Petal Gleam, Sea Gleam, or Snow Gleam are active, attack power increases every second and then maxes out at a max of 7% after 15 seconds. And then by using all three of these S abilities together, I then increase my attack power by an additional 13% in total. And because of how quickly Luster attacks, this is all incredibly easy to keep active. But there are a ton of other S1 through 5 abilities that you can use on your weapons that are still just as incredibly strong. Now, I just want to keep in mind that I'm only going to be going over the ones that'll increase your damage. The reason for this is because all of the other ones are incredibly niche and or will be based on your own personal playstyle. So I'm going to be leaving a link down in the description below to the PSO2 NA Visiphone, and then create things based on what you see fit. Now, there are a ton of S1 abilities that you can use, but the ones that I'll be listing here are kind of the ones that I think will find the most use to the average player. Now, starting off with S1 Augment Will, which increases your attack power by 0.5% for every augment affixed to this weapon, which maxes out at a max of 4% for 8 augments. And for the sake of future-proofing this video, Augment Will also then has a second version, increases power by 0.75% for each augment affixed to this weapon and then maxes out at 6%. Now, if you guys don't have access to any of those, you guys can then use S1 Goliath Slayer's Will. Now, keep in mind that this is only one that you can use on bosses, because what it does is it increases damage dealt to bosses by 4%. Now, for solo bosses like Profound Darkness or Mom and Dad or even Omega Masquerade, maybe Sodam, this is actually incredibly strong. But in every other content series, you may not find any use in this. Now, I also have 2 more honorable mentions, with the first one being S1 Time Flow Will, which increases attack power for every second to a maximum of 4% after 30 seconds. Considering all the other things that are available in the S1 slot, this isn't actually all that great because of the time requirement used behind it. And then another one is actually S1 Ranged Amp or Melee Amp, which increases attack power by 1% for every 60 range power affixed to the weapon, then increases attack power by an additional 2% if at least 200 range power is affixed to this weapon. Keep in mind that the in-game tooltip is in fact wrong. It's not per second, it's actually per ranged power. And considering the Crass and Ayer weapon series only allow for 3 stat-based augments on them, not including the 1 through 5 S abilities, these are good only on things like the Atlas EX or even the Lightstream weapons, or Trailblazer rather. Now, there's also a couple of other S1 abilities that you can put in the slot as well, like S1 Aggressive Will or even S1 Skillful Adept or S1 Skillful Adept 2, which then increases your power by 2%, or for Skillful Adepts, increase your crit rate by anywhere between 15 to 18%, depending on which one you use. Now, for S2s, let me get the one that I'm definitely going to forget out of the way, which is S2 Aggressive Will. S2 Aggressive Will increases your attack power by 2%. And then you have a couple of others like S2 Precision Will or S2 Precision Will 2, which increases your critical hit damage by 3% or 4% respectively. And then if you don't have that, then you also have S2 Goliath Slayer's Will, which then increases damage dealt to bosses by 3%. Now, the reasons why I would go against doing things like Precision Will or even Skillful Adept in the S2 slot is mainly because it doesn't add enough damage to be able to justify it. If you're not critting, then you're not doing enough damage. And if you do crits, then you need to be able to have enough crit damage to be able to back that up as well. But again, keep in mind that these are just personal preferences and information that I'm just giving out to you guys, as well as my opinions and thoughts. And then for S3s, it's very similar to the S2s, where you have aggressive will or the precision wills, or even Goliath Slayer's will. Now, normally I would have some honorable mentions here, but the other two, like Axiom Will or Persistent Fury, require you to play next to perfectly to be able to get them at their full use. For Axiom Will, it increases attack power by 3% while HP is above 80%. And then for Persistent Fury, it increases attack power by 4% and critical hit rate by 5%, and then enhances PP efficiency by several different effects. But the problem is that the effects will be lost when damage is taken, and then has a 3-minute cooldown. So as far as S3s are concerned, I would go back into our S2 list and then just match the S3 versions of those. And then when it comes to S4s, there are quite a few that you can definitely use. And if you're using the full melt style, there's even one that then enables the use of being able to increase your crit damage with the augments that we previously mentioned, and then also allows you to be able to reuse your critical strike ring to be able to give you anywhere between 70 to 80% crit rate on your luster. Or if you're using full melt style, which then you're probably weaving multiple different PAs together, then it allows you to be able to hit 100% crit rate thanks to Tech Art's PA multi bonus, which is a skill on the luster tree. Then going back to S4 abilities that find a lot of use on luster, you have S4 Steadfast Will, which increases normal attack power by 13%. Personally, I find this best used on something like Barand style in my opinion, but again, this could be used on just about any style really. Then you have S4 Escalating Pursuit, which is upon hitting a PA or technique, track 30% of the damage dealt within the next 4 seconds, and then add additional damage to the next PA or technique based on the damage dealt. Now this does have a 250,000 damage max damage cap, and then also has a 10-second cooldown. In my opinion, this is basically 250,000 free damage every 10 seconds, or 14 seconds rather. And then the S4 ability that I was talking about before, which is incredibly strong for Fomel style, which is S4 Amplified Adept, which critical hit rate increases by 50% when attacking an enemy afflicted by any status effect, including Gelin and Blight rounds. Now, considering Fomel style is the only one that can actually go ahead and can proc Gelin, but again, using this is definitely a personal preference, and if you decide not to, no harm, no foul. And then recently, I've been seeing a lot of players then use the S4 Dodge Training, which perform an evasive maneuver when 2 circles overlap to gain successful dodge counter status. If you do not, then recover 5% HP. Now, Dodge Training is my honorable mention here because I personally wouldn't use it, but I completely understand why others would use it. Basically, when using Dodge Training, you get a free counter ability if you do it when the rings overlap, but if you don't, you get HP instead. And then for the S5 augment slot, you really only have one that's actually worth it, and that is S5 Skillful Adept Will, which increases your critical hit rate by 20%, and then critical hits deal an additional 2% damage, and then recovers 1% of the damage dealt as HP, with 30 HP being the max that you get back. There is another S5 ability that you can use, and that is S5 Amplified Restraint, which has the effect of deal 3% more damage against enemies afflicted by a status effect, and then 40% chance to inflict bind on enemies inflicted with a status effect. Now, to my knowledge, this does not work on Blight rounds or Gelin, but I could be wrong here, and if anybody has the correct answer to that, that would be awesome. Now, these two S5 abilities, they're really the only ones that you'll be putting on a gunblade because S5 abilities are actually normally used for specific weapons. For example, S5 Lightning Pursuit has the tooltip that then adds on the fact that it's only able to be activated on soaring blades. Now, there is another one, which is S5 Augment Bloom, which doubles the effect of attack, defense, dexterity, HP, and PP augments on this weapon, but it does not work on percent affixes. Not to mention that as we start getting into some of the later weapon series, then unfortunately, that double is really just putting things on par with current weapons. Since you'd usually only have like 120 of the max stat, it only becomes 240, and then doubling whatever amount of PP that you get. It's just simply not worth it, in my opinion. Now that all of that is out of the way, I'm not going to get into how to affix in this video, but for those of you guys who are aware of how to affix, what I am going to show you is an example of what to be shooting for on an 8-slot unit. Now keep in mind is that mainly all of these affixes are easily obtainable with just a little bit of farming as well as mission badge capsules and then using the augment transfer system. So because they're easily obtainable, this is just something to shoot for, because obviously going for the absolute best affixes on your units may not entirely be the most effective, considering New Genesis is right around the corner. But for those of you guys who are going to be playing both like myself, then this will be perfect for you. So without going for Guardian Soul, the ideal 8-slot unit would in fact be Astral Soul, Mana Reverie, Ether Factor, Grand Shoot, Returner 5, Crack 5, Doombreak 2, and then whatever S ability that you're going to use on your unit. To be quite honest, you don't actually have to go too crazy. I mean, you can even go for a half of these. You can get rid of Returner 5 and Crack 5 and go with a 6-slot unit if you really wanted to. Then if you really wanted to, you could basically replace Astral Soul with Guardian Soul. And that's in fact all you really need to do also, because I don't think Global has the ability to put Mark Courage on our units either. So ideally this is what you'd be looking for. And in case I lost you at Returners, Returners is actually called Veterans Resolve in the global version of the game. And then as far as whatever augments you want to put on your weapons, those are actually even easier, considering the fact that in future weapon series, you're only able to have 3 stat-based augments on that weapon. And again, this is because you'll be using S1s through 5. So for a weapon, you'll be using things like Guardian Soul, Mana Reverie, and then a Grand Shoot. And then again, for a Fomal style Gunblade, you'd be changing that ever so slightly with then removing Mana Reverie to then be able to add Phrase Decay, which then Phrase Decay gives you boost damage inflicted to enemies affected by Gelin by 5%. And then that's it. Now, however you choose to use this information, I really do hope that this video was able to help you. I know this was not a beginner-friendly video, but either way, if you made it here to the end, thank you so very much for your time. As always, stay awesome, stay beautiful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. I'm out.